Come on.
Welcome to the Afterthoughts podcast. We have an awesome episode today. We just did baptism weekend here at our church and baptized tons of people and got to hear a bunch of stories of people's lives, people getting in the water, proclaiming their faith in Jesus, and so many great stories this weekend. And one of the people that told their story is here with us today. Yasemin, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Here we go, Yasemin.
Afterthoughts.
Come on.
This is a podcast where we talk about faith, family, fun. I still can't quite get it.
Yeah.
I'm working on our
We're
tag.
workshopping family and fun.
Ryan wrote
man.
it. Faith, family, fun, football. And so we love telling stories. We love getting to hear people's life change and what God has done. And your story was so fascinating when I started to hear the pieces of it. Jacob, who filmed your testimony and everybody else's, he's like, bro, you gotta help me condense this. This could go for a while, which is why we're standing right before the service was about to start. This line of people about to see their testimonies in front of the whole church. They're going to get baptized, this massive moment. I just walk up, never met Yasemin before. I'm like, hey, will you be on the podcast?
That's what you opened with?
That's what I opened with. She was very gracious. She's like, sure.
What
I don't know who you are or what that means.
Oh, Afterthoughts. What is that?
We'll explain it all. It's a podcast where we talk about faith and culture and family and football.
Sounds like a cute podcast.
It's very fun. So we want to get to your story. We want to hear from you real quick just to warm up.
Yes.
We have questions with Kayla.
Hello.
Kayla here likes to. She's the most curious person you'll ever meet.
I have so many questions in my life.
So ask Yasemin a question or two so the people can get to know her. The Afterthoughts family can know Yasemin.
Yes. Well, hi.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
If you could live anywhere for 1 year, because I know sometimes it's like I don't want to leave like my family or whatever, but if you could live somewhere for 1 year, where would you live?
Rome, hands down.
Whoa.
Rome.
Is
That's
there a
my
reason
absolute
why?
favorite city in the world.
I love
Whoa.
that. Have you
Nice.
ever been?
Yeah. Actually, recently, about a year ago, was my first time there. It was a childhood dream
Yes.
to finally go visit all of the history there. And it absolutely lived up to its reputation. I highly recommend it.
Come on.
That's awesome. We
I
were
haven't
just.
heard that one. I love that.
That's where the
great.
Ryder Cup just was most recently, which is a golf tournament that you don't care about. We were just talking about how Yasemin doesn't
Don't bring
care
it
about
back
golf.
to golf.
It's happening. Okay, next question.
Well, speaking of dreams, my next question actually is, what's a dream of yours that you hope to accomplish or do at some point, or maybe you're currently living it out? I don't know.
Become a best-selling author. I actually just
Oh.
published my very first book.
Let's go.
Yes.
I'm on my way.
Wait, tell us about the book.
Yeah.
Jacob, can you bring up a graphic of the book? Here.
Oh,
Boom.
So it's, right here. This is, yep.
So it's called The Crimson Run. It is an historical fiction, young adult story that's kind of Sherlock Holmes meets Pirates of the Caribbean.
I would
what?
probably
If that
love
grabs
The
some
Crimson
attention.
Run.
Yes.
The Crimson
A little bit
Run.
of steampunk if anybody's into that.
Okay.
Let's
Wow.
go. Everybody stop listening to this
Yeah.
for just a second. Go order The Crimson Run and then hit play again and
Is the
keep
book
listening.
out?
It is. Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com.
Oh, that's
No,
awesome.
let's
All right, we'll
go.
link that. That's
two
awesome.
authors here.
Yeah,
Yes.
of course. Two authors.
Whoa.
And
go.
two,
Come on.
amazing.
And two podcasters.
And golfers.
And these guys are cool too.
Yeah. That's
Not
awesome.
as cool as us, though.
Single
Not even
today, The Crimson Run. Put that's the summer reading list.
That's awesome.
How many AR points for those books? Do you remember
mine,
AR?
Mine is 2 AR points. It's a pretty easy read.
What did Ethan say to encourage Ryan in his biggest breakthrough of his life?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Wow, man, that's crazy.
Yes. That's awesome.
so
Congratulations.
Thank you so
Super
much.
cool.
Best-selling. Did you write any of it in Rome?
Ooh.
I did not. Rome was my break. I had just finished writing it at that time.
Yep,
So
that's cool.
I needed a break.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, tell us a little bit about what you do for work real quick. You
Yeah.
write. What else?
Also a composer and a digital marketer. I work for myself in all three capacities, so we'll see how
A
that
composer
goes.
of like music?
Yeah, cinematic style music, so like soundtrack stuff.
You're speaking.
Are you
to all the
serious?
love languages.
Like Tony Anderson-esque? Do you know who I'm talking about?
Zimmer.
Hans Zimmer?
Hans Zimmer.
There you go.
Yeah,
Not familiar
Okay.
with Tony Anderson, but yeah, kind of
That's-
Hans
Yeah.
Zimmer, James
Wow.
Horner,
Okay.
John
Really?
Williams, yeah, that kind of category.
Dang.
How do you do that?
That's amazing.
It all synth, honestly.
Yeah. Are you on Spotify or anything like that?
Oh, okay, here we go.
Spotify, Apple Music, wherever.
Plug it. Say it.
Under your name or something else?
Yes, it's under my name, Yasemin Salama.
Okay. That's amazing.
That's
That's my
incredible.
favorite writing music and running music. And so there we go.
How
Wow.
do you?
It
How do
works,
you?
right? They come together.
Yes.
I was gonna say, so composing, huh? How do you do it? But seriously, how do you do that? Like
Yeah.
compose
Yeah.
something
great
like an
question.
instrumental piece like that.
It is actually also story driven. It'll usually start off with kind of a short story or a poem, and then I sit down at the keyboard and start messing around with what is the feeling that I want to evoke with that story.
Okay.
How do I want to put my listeners into that emotional state? And then honestly, it's a lot of improv after that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's all synth, and then I play a bunch of different wind instruments that will carry the melody live.
Are you visualizing like a movie scene as you compose?
100%. Yeah, writing in music. It's all movies in my head.
Did you start playing music from a young age?
Yeah, 5.
Really?
Both actually, the music and writing. I was about 5 when I started.
Jeez.
Wow.
I don't think I could tie my shoes.
You couldn't.
Are you a certified genius? I'm serious. I feel like your IQ is 200
Show
plus
us
just
your
from talking to you for 6 minutes. You have like a thing you carry in your wallet. Like, it's okay, I'm a genius.
You
So
know,
I
that's
can
actually
answer.
a good idea. I should
Yeah,
probably
I
start
think
that.
that might be true of you.
Wow.
What do you do for a
Thanks for
living?
the
I'm a
praise.
genius.
I'm a professional genius.
That's a good one, actually.
You can say that, and I just
Yeah.
just hearing you talk for a few minutes, I believe that. If I say that, people will be like, "Okay, funny guy,
cool, man.
What are you doing there?"
Pie in the face. I'm looking at you. No, you're not.
No, you're not.
Okay.
I understand that. Well, thank you for jumping on here. Tell us a little bit. So you just got baptized, which is a big move, publicly proclaiming your faith in Jesus, but you have a very unique background and backstory that has led to this whole faith journey for you. And for me, hearing some of it, it was so interesting because I think you've come after it in such a compelling way to so many people that have so many questions. And I think you found answers to a lot of those things. So take us back to you're 5 years old, you're composing music, what your childhood kind of led into and the questions of faith that you had.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you should start by saying that I am a child of 2 worlds. I was born to a Christian mother and a Muslim father, and they are still married and going strong 30 plus years later.
for them.
So
Wow.
yeah, they could write a book on how to keep a marriage together. And they are honestly the best parents that any kid could have asked for. And one of the things I like to share is that I genuinely believe that both were the best examples of their respective faiths that you could ask to be around, and have that as both of your parents was just an absolute blessing. But nevertheless, being a child of 2 worlds does present a lot of challenges. So namely, it was that as soon as people find out that you're mixed, they kind of just want you to choose. They want you to pick a side. And it's subtle. I was very fortunate not to really run into bullying or judgment or anything. It was more of just this constant pressure of, I'd go into a group of, let's say, American Christian kids, just trying to make friends. I'm 8 years old, right? And they find out my dad's Muslim. Well, did you know your dad's going to hell? Like, that's the
Jeez.
first thing they say. And I'm sitting
Wow.
there like, no, I just wanted to make friends. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't ask for this. And then it would be the same thing. I
Wow.
go into a group of Muslim kids just trying to make friends. They find out my mom is Christian. And then, well, your mom's an idiot, right? And this is the rhetoric. Like, it wasn't in my home. It was outside the home that I was constantly bombarded with just the need for people to just wanting you to just fit in, like fit the mold. And I never struggled with that. I embraced from the very beginning the fact that I was mixed. Like, to me, that was just normal. But that also meant that I really didn't have a definition of normal, because it was 2 of everything, right? I had 2 different cultures, 2 different languages, 2 different religions, 2 different worldviews, honestly, if we kind of take it from a bird's eye view. So I think that primed me for a way of, I don't know how else to phrase this except to say open-minded thinking.
Yeah.
Where I didn't necessarily know where I personally stood on many things, because there's multiple different ways that I can think about it, right? And that proved to actually be the biggest struggle. So I grew up in a very loving home, a very good home. I was very supported, very well respected, very well loved, and I'm best friends with everybody in my family. I have 2 brothers, both of my parents I'm really close to, like everyone. We were just this really tight-knit family. And that was despite having this big elephant in the room that nobody wanted to talk about, which was mom's Christian. So being raised with a Muslim father, my father found out after he got married that Islam could be the only religion in the home, that he, as the father figure, needed to raise us Muslim. So my mom backed off, and she, dug through her Bible to try to, like, how do I navigate this if I can't teach my children Christianity? We weren't allowed to read the Bible. The word Jesus, I can't say was necessarily a taboo word per se. It just felt like it. It felt like it was. And so this was the setup for the way that my mom, as a Christian, kind of had to back off and trust God with her children's faith, trust God to honor her family and keep her family together. And she chose to honor, love, respect, and obey her husband. And I saw that. I didn't know what it was, what I was looking at.
Wow.
But my mom and my dad, and the way that they decided to handle it, they did a great job at keeping the peace within the family. So what that did for me was it took the emotions out of the equation of, let's say, oh, I like mom more than dad, or something like that, which I've run into with other children who were born of two worlds. They would often like choose their favorite side or something. I didn't have that. I genuinely loved both my parents and respected both my parents, and they did such a good job to keep things peaceful within the home. But nevertheless, being raised Muslim, there was just always that thing in the back of my head of, yeah, but mom's Christian though. Yeah, but there's another viewpoint. There's another thought process here. So I was pretty young when I just kind of started picking up on the nuances and the blatant pressure to be fully Muslim, to speak Arabic, to completely choose the Middle Eastern side of my heritage. And again, this was not in the home. This was mostly outside the home. And eventually it just got to a point where I had been accosted so many times by, extended family from both sides, by friends, by everybody from Muslims, Christians, atheists, Catholics. Like, it didn't matter. It was just everybody wanting me to just attacking my family, attacking my parents, attacking us as my brothers and I. And I got to the point where I was just so done with it.
Yeah.
And I realized I don't know where I stand on any of this. So when I was 14 years old, I approached my father.
Had you been practicing? So like reading the Quran, going to mosque, prayer all through the day, all those kinds of things?
So sort of, for the most part, yes.
Yeah.
But as the daughter, I kind of aged out of being able to go to the mosque with my father, because eventually I would have needed to go to the women's side.
Right.
And so I wasn't really raised in the mosque per se, but I was raised studying the Quran, memorizing the Quran.
Yeah.
There were several different, I would say, curriculum that I was studying.
Yeah.
I was homeschooled growing up as well, and so our Sundays were our Arabic and Islamic studies.
Got it.
So my father would teach us both Arabic and Islam, which I just want to say Arabic is such a hard language.
Is it hard?
So hard.
Yeah.
So no, I don't speak it, to answer the
I was going to ask
question here.
She's good. Oh, cross that off my list. Answered.
And when it comes to extended family, like your dad's parents, your mom's parents, if you're seeing like grandparents, you're seeing aunts and uncles, is there an added pressure to make it even like more polarized of like grandparents pulling you this way and other grandparents pulling you that way? Did you struggle with that at all?
Yes. So it was mostly my grandparents passed when I was young, so it was mostly my aunts and uncles and all of their children, and again, Middle Eastern culture, we don't differentiate between a first and a fourth cousin. Like, they're just cousins. And so my family is huge. There's a lot of different people, and we're all scattered across the globe. My mom's family is scattered within the States. My dad's family is literally scattered across the globe. So our central location for family reunions was Jordan. So I've been to Jordan many times growing up, and a lot of the struggle when all of this would come to a head was when we would go to the Middle East to visit the family. So once again, very loving family. Super close with my cousins, love my aunts and uncles to death. Like, everybody is good people. Everybody is super sweet, but everybody is also very opinionated.
Got it.
And everybody wants to do their part in ensuring that you grow up to be a good, strong Muslim and strong in your religion. So there was just, once again, so much undue pressure that for any verse of the Quran that I had memorized, it was, how come you don't have this one memorized? Let me teach you how to memorize this one as well. So it was a constant pressure of never feeling like you're enough. And then just add the language to it. The moment everybody finds out I don't speak Arabic, then that becomes the focal point. It's not about who you are. It's, well, why don't you speak Arabic though? And so there was just a lot of, again, heart's in the right place kind of thing, but nevertheless, as a kid, you can't differentiate between that. It just felt like judgment and pressure. So a lot of that happened more during our times of visiting our family in the Middle East. And then coming back home, home for me is California, we were isolated from the rest of the family. We were the only ones there. So then that became more of kids that I met, family and friends that we ran into, that our families pursued as kind of another family, since all of our immediate family was scattered.
Yeah.
Okay, so 14, you're like, I'm gonna go figure this out for myself. You got all these inputs and opinions and people putting pressure on you, people of all faiths that are kind of making you turned off to so many different things, and you're like, I'm just gonna go do this myself. Tell us about that journey and what you started to discover.
Yeah, so something to kind of understand about, I would call it more Arab culture, maybe more so than Islam specifically, but there's a lot of handing you your opinion with the expectation that you're gonna push back or, try that it'll just become a whole debate, right? But that pressure is nevertheless, but this is what we think, and therefore this is what you should think as well. Yeah. It's never presented as a question. It's presented as, here's your opinion. And that never sat well with me. My brain immediately goes into skepticism and pushback and, all right, let's hash this out. Debate is on. So not having a way to answer anybody's, I would say, questions. It wasn't questions. It was, I did not have a way of defending myself, my family, anybody's beliefs. And it didn't matter who it was coming from. If it was a Christian, I felt like I needed to defend my father. If it was a Muslim, I felt like I needed to defend my mother.
Yeah.
So when I was 14 was when everything kind of came to a head for me. A couple of things had happened that were just really upsetting. And it was just feeling like this constant tug of war within my family, this unspoken, nobody's trying to do this. It was just happening by nature of living in a family with two different religions, right? So I decided I need to find out for myself, what do I think?
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to do this behind my dad's back, so I approached him, asked him if I could talk to him, and we had like a solid 2 to 3 hour, very deep and emotional and all kinds of tears conversation of just me sharing with him what I was struggling with and what was bothering me. And I told him, here's what I want to do. I would like to ask your permission to study both, which essentially meant I was asking permission to study the Bible.
Yeah.
Right. I wanted everybody to stay out of it. I didn't want to hear anybody's opinion. Yeah. And I told them, it's not that I don't respect what you think or what mom thinks or anything. I have to do this independently of you guys. Wow. Otherwise, I'm not going to ever truly come to my own conclusion on this.
Yeah.
So he understood, and again, it was a beautiful conversation that I will never forget, and I'm just so grateful that it ended with him giving me permission to study both, and he just requested that I study Islam first, which I said, fair enough, we'll do. So that launched me off on a 12-year, largely intellectual journey in which I just studied the heck out of Islam, Christianity, world religions, atheistic viewpoints. Like I ran the gamut, but mostly focused on Islam and Christianity because at the very least I needed to know what I thought of those two, regardless of if I ever chose either one of them.
Did you do any of that in school, or is this just all your own time, your passion, your pursuit?
This was all my own time.
Wow.
Yeah, at this time I was homeschooled, so I had the time as well to dive into it, which was nice. And both my parents just kind of made it part of my curriculum. Like, okay, world religion study, here you go.
Yeah, so cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's very cool. As you're doing that, are you seeing like the two as completely like two separate worldviews, or is it more like a Venn diagram with overlap? And as you continue to study over those 12 years, is that overlap getting stronger, or are you seeing them separate more? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I started off thinking that there was more overlap than there was. It did not actually take me long to get into it before I realized, oh no, there's very, very little overlap here. They are two very distinctly different worldviews. On the surface, they can appear as though they're very similar. You don't need to dig too far to find that they're pretty different. Again, aligned on some of their values, but worldview, from the worldview perspective, very, very different. And that, I'll just kind of start there with when the first thing I did was open up the Quran and start reading it from the very first chapter. I read the first chapter, was bored out of my mind, so I set it down. And then launched into just reading books about the Quran or about, I read the 3 top forms of the Hadith. There's like 3 different versions of it that are considered the most authentic. So I read all 3 of them.
For people, the Hadith, explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, so the Hadith is the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad. So there's the Quran, which is the what Muhammad dictated, the revelations that he received from God, and what he dictated to his followers at the time was all combined into the Quran. The Hadith is what people who knew him, the more authentic, meaning that they're the people closest to him, that the things that they remember him doing or saying, or how he handled different situations. So in many ways, the Hadith is just as important to Muslims as the Quran is, but the Hadith is not viewed as the word of God the way that the Quran is.
Yep. So you're reading that.
Reading that. Because a lot of what you see in Islam, like how it actually manifests, is actually from the Hadith. It's the way that they live it out. So I read all of that.
Yep.
I watched a lot of videos and debates and online articles, read a lot of individual books to just dive into what is this about, what do they believe. And at that point, this was only a few years into it where I kind of just was like, okay, sure, like you can choose this if you want. And I will also say that I approached it on the assumption it was true. Like when I was studying Islam, I assumed it was true and I proceeded accordingly.
Okay.
And then I realized pretty quick that as far as the truth of it, it was like, okay, well, is their identity of Jesus in Islam, is that accurate? And I realized there was a ton of stuff in the Quran that you really don't understand what it means without having a background in Christianity or understanding Christian beliefs. Otherwise, it's like, why is this here? Well, this doesn't make sense. And since I didn't have a background in Christianity, that was exactly what I was asking. What does this mean? So I switched gears at that point to study the Bible. I was like, all right, here, let's dive into who Jesus is. Let's dive into what are the beliefs that Christians have independent of what the Quran or Islam says that they believe. And so,
And you go into that not with the assumption this is true.
no, same thing.
Oh, same
Yeah.
thing.
I
Okay,
just
okay.
immediately
Same
switched gears.
approach.
Now
Got
I'm
it.
assuming
Okay,
Christianity
got
is
you.
true, and we'll proceed
Yep.
accordingly.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Mm-hmm.
So same thing. I started in Genesis, bored out of my mind, set it aside, and moved on to just books.
Books
and,
about the Bible.
Yeah.
At least I could say they were equal in that regard. Yeah, as a 14-year-old, you know, they're both
of
hard
course.
ones to read.
Yep.
Yeah.
But with Christianity, I quickly
It's not what I was
realized-
doing at 14.
No, no.
This is incredible.
To be fair.
Just learning to read.
Yeah, pretty much.
So when I did switch gears to Christianity and started reading those books, I think the first thing that struck me was just how not like Islam it was.
Yeah.
The two books themselves were very, very different. You cannot read them with the same mindset or in the same way. The Bible was very much a story. The Quran does not read that way at all. If you don't understand how the verses all came together, it feels very disjointed. So
Like stream of consciousness, kind of.
Yeah, like the way that it's organized is just weird. If you're not used to it. So I ended up tackling Islam topically, where I was like, okay, let's do a study of what does the Quran say about women in Islam? What does the Quran say about heaven? What does the Quran say about God and who God is? And so I did it by topic, and that was a lot more effective for me. I was able to follow the Quran better.
Yeah.
And then with the Bible, that one was different because I tried doing it topically, and that was a distinct rabbit hole. So many different rabbit holes to go down. I was like, okay, this isn't working. So I got to a point of frustration, actually, probably when I was about 17 or 18, where I was like, okay, just pick one. Like, why? What is the difference? Why does it matter? And that led me to the conclusion that, or I guess to ask myself the question, what are you looking for? Because you can study both of these to the end of time. Is it really going to make a difference for you? And I decided what I was looking for was truth. I wanted to understand my world and my place in it. I wanted to find reality. And once I made that mental switch, that then got me a whole lot more focused to, okay, quite literally, no other world religion or worldview matters if Jesus is who he claims he is. Like, they all hinge on who Jesus is. It is the only one that is rooted in a historical event that's verifiable. So I did a historical study on it then. I was like, all right, let's find out if Jesus actually claimed to be God, and if not, what did he claim? And let's find out, was he actually resurrected? Because if he was, guys, somebody rose from the dead. Like, why are we arguing this right now? If it's provable, there's no question. I don't need to learn about anything else in the world. This is the only thing that matters. So that figuring that out, that is the identity of Jesus that everything hinges on, was curious to me. There was one worldview that was the hinge point for everything else.
For everything.
Anyway, no decisions made at that point. But
what is the Islamic understanding of Jesus? How is he presented? Because it sounded like he kind of just pops in there in the Quran, and you're kind of like, what? Who is this and why? What is that bigger topical understanding of him?
Yeah, so Islam, first of all, assumes that you do already know who Jesus is and that you know who the Christians claim he is. There's a definite assumption there. So if you don't know what the Christians claim, which most people do at this point, but if you don't know, it's gonna feel strange. Like, who is this person? So Jesus in Islam is a very well respected prophet. He is another prophet / messenger of God that was sent to the Jews at that time to bring the message of love. And he brought what they call the Injil, which is the Bible. But they define the Bible as an uncorrupted version of what we have, what Christians believe is the Bible. So they believe that Moses brought the Torah, Jesus brought the Bible, and then Muhammad came with the correction that brought all of it together in the Quran.
Okay.
So Jesus is a very loved and respected figure, but very much a man and a prophet of God.
Yes.
And they teach that he never claimed that he was the Messiah or Son of God.
Correct.
Okay.
They teach that he was not resurrected, that he didn't die on the cross as well, that he was taken up to heaven.
And that
Before I could kill
those
him.
who believe in him or claim him as Messiah are doomed, essentially.
It's an interesting question, right?
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure because in the Quran, it's both. They're referred to as the people of the book, and there are times in the Quran that they are mentioned as, you need to love and respect the people of the book, your neighbors, and then there's other times where it's mentioned as if this is a terrible thing and you should not listen to them, and like it's a little confusing.
Okay.
So with the dual messaging in there, I'd be reluctant to say exactly what they actually believe. I would just say that they absolutely do not believe that Jesus is Son of God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
Can you speak, while we're on the topic, a little bit into afterlife? From like, if you take the Bible out of it, and if we're just looking at the Quran, speak into what happens after you die.
That'll be an interesting one. So a lot of my studies in Islam, and I want to preface this by saying this is what I found when I was doing the homework, so that's my disclaimer. There was a lot more of, I guess you could parallel it to the Dante's Inferno kind of viewpoint of heaven and hell. It's a little more polarized of like, this is the punishment and this is the reward. It's a very reward and punishment system.
Yeah.
There is no actual point system, but it reads that way. It feels that way of like the more good deeds that you do, the bigger your house in heaven will be.
Yeah.
And so that kind of leads then to a certain way of living, right? Where you're kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, tallying up the points, even though that's not actually an Islamic concept.
Yeah.
It's a lot of parallels to our pleasures here. Like you're going to get a bigger house. You're going to be like able to choose the nicer area, food for days and, no consequences, any which different thing you would want to eat. And also, again, in my opinion, from what I read, very close to that particular time period and what they would have considered a paradise. So that afterlife being heaven, and then afterlife of hell being punishment for all of the bad things that you have done. I didn't spend a lot of time on hell, to be honest. I mostly was more interested in heaven. I will also say, because this was something that was important to me, you always hear about the 40 virgins thing. Of like, or the 70 virgins or something like that. I forget the exact number of what you will receive in heaven. And my very first question was, I'm a female, is that me? Am I one of these virgins? What do I get? I don't want 70 virgins. Like, what does heaven look like for a woman? Because it very much seemed to me that it was based on paradise from a man's perspective. I never did find an answer to that question. So I'm going to leave that one open-ended. It was inconclusive. I left it as a moot point, but it was nevertheless something that bothered
That's
me.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you hone in 17 or 18. You're like, okay, it turns out it seems like everything in the world hinges on this Jesus guy. And if he claimed to be who Christians say he claimed to be, and did he prove that he was? Tell us about that journey then, historically looking at Jesus and everything that came from there.
Yeah, so that was at the part where my journey started to get a whole lot more focused. And that's when I really started to see, in hindsight, God working in my life. It became every question that I had, because now I'm pretty knowledgeable, right? Like again, for a 17-year-old, swearing like I know all of these things. So at that time, I was feeling pretty good about it. Like, I've read a lot of books now, I know a lot of things, but I still don't understand this concept here, or what does this mean? And so I did start praying at that point of saying, okay, God, I know that you're real, but I don't know what that means. So let me start by saying, if you are real, show me who you are. Don't let me be deceived. Like, just reveal to me who you are, not who anybody else thinks you are. I'm looking for the truth. And my prayer was somewhere along that line, because I figured can happen. He's not real, and my prayer won't be answered one direction or another. Best that can happen is he'll lead me right to him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was also me saying that I'm trusting God to lead me to the truth.
Yeah.
So that I'm not just exclusively relying on my little 17-year-old mind, As soon as I started praying that, not kidding, I would ask one question, and then the very next day, I'd meet some random person that had a book that answers this question.
Cool.
Wow.
And knowing the way that my brain operates, I'm thorough. I look at it from all
So it
different
seems.
angles. One person telling me something's not going to do it for me. So the amount of times that I was just handed a book that was like, oh, okay, that checks out. And then, okay, but let me cross-reference it, like with who disagrees? Where's the disagreement point?
Yeah.
And let's study that. The more that I did this exercise of here's the viewpoint, here's the counter argument, the more I was finding that these arguments against it were just not holding water. Not by a little, by a lot. Like there was no argument there to begin with. Again, on the surface, it sounded like there was.
Sure.
A couple of the main ones actually came more from atheism of like, I forget his name, Mithras or whatever, Apollonius of Tiana. Like these are people who are like, oh yeah, historically they had the same story as Jesus. And I'm like, guys, 10 minutes of research. No, they didn't.
Yeah.
No, they didn't. But you just hear that
Yep.
and it confuses you.
Yep.
It was not a difficult study
Yeah.
to determine that that's not the reality of it. Another argument is the books of the Bible. What about all these other ones? The Gospel of Barnabas, the Gospel of Thomas,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
Gospel
yeah,
of Mary.
right.
Why aren't they in there? I'm like, guys, have you read those?
Yeah.
They don't belong in there.
Right.
They just
Yeah.
don't.
Right.
So again, these were not difficult arguments to refute. It was just go do 10 minutes of research and it's right there.
But we live in a culture where most people would rather just be told what to think so they
Oh,
don't have
yeah.
to go figure it out for
Give
themselves.
me the 90-second TikTok version,
Yeah.
Hey,
and
we got
I'll listen
Google
to
now.
it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
just- we got Chat GPT. Literally just plug it in. And
Right.
It'll give you the
Right.
information you're
Yeah,
looking for.
it's like it gets easier actually to find the truth, but people just kind of would rather just what their smart friend said and just
Yeah.
take that and secondhand smoke their faith or whatever they say.
It
Okay.
kind of, yeah. I found that it aligns with what they already want to think. I was coming for a perspective of I have no idea what I think.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that benefited me a lot in this journey.
Gosh.
Yeah.
So
Some might say a place of
yeah.
humility is where you were coming from,
I
where
sure
most people
hope so.
don't. You know, that's awesome. Okay,
Gosh, yeah.
so you're refuting some of these theories or arguments against Jesus. Continue on that journey.
Yeah, so the Islamic side was really where it was near and dear to my heart. So at this point, it was starting to become clear to me that Islam was not true. Not that Christianity was. These were two different decisions. Islam is not true, and Christianity
Why
is.
is that? That it was feeling like this isn't the truth I was looking for.
The historical record was really bothering me. The more that I was reading and learning and exploring how Islam came to be, the more I was finding patterns that indicated to me that, okay, one or two of these things I'll dismiss, but dozens of these points that were all indicating to me that this is one way or another a man-made belief system. It was a really, really upsetting thing for me. Again, this is
Yeah.
my family that believes
Yeah.
this, and
Yeah.
I wanted it to be true. I wanted there to be substance there. And I got to a point where I wasn't finding anything new. Like I read it within the span of a few years and was not finding any new information about it. Now, this is also the point that I'm going to preface by saying that a lot of the information that is parallel to like Christian apologetics is in Arabic. They don't have translated versions of it. So I was a little bit limited
Yeah.
Islamically in what I could study. But I still felt that if this is true, though, wouldn't truth be independent of the language you speak? Wouldn't you still be able to find it regardless of where you grew up, of who your family is, of what your language is? And the more that I delved into what is the definition of truth, the more that definition didn't align with many of the beliefs that Islam was perpetuating. And once again, I was like, okay, on the surface, sure, just pick it. But the more that I'm delving into it, delving into these topics and finding there's really not much in there for everybody. Truth should be independent of who you are. It's going to be timeless. It's going to be whether you're smart or an idiot. Truth is truth. It doesn't change just because you can't see it or
Yeah.
because you don't understand it.
Great.
And that
Thank you for including idiots for us. We
Yeah.
appreciate it. It means a lot.
We've always resonated with that.
point being that you can find truth because it simply is the nature of truth. And the more that I studied Islam, I was like, no, this is very much designed for you to have a level of intelligence and the ability to read, the ability to comprehend this very complex language of Arabic. I'll bring it back to the historical record that didn't line up. It was their claims about Christianity, ironically, that it was its undoing to me. I found not only zero support for Jesus not claiming to be God, I found a whole heap of load of support that he did. Not only did I not find any support that the Bible was tampered with, I found a whole heap of load of support that it is very, very well preserved. In fact, one of the most well preserved, if not the most well preserved, historical document we have. Islam doesn't have that. It doesn't have a paper trail that backs it up. It very much feels like it came here. This is what was given. I don't pretend to know how it got there. I'm not going to. That would be all speculation. I tried that study. It was all speculation. So the more that I realized that their claims about Christianity were just didn't hold water. It was eventually, ironically, the stories of the prophets themselves that got me. Because these stories, Islamically, the prophets and messengers, the ones from the Old Testament, they are sinless. They do not make mistakes. These are pure people. And then you go read the Bible. No, they're not. These are some of the
weirdest stories you've ever heard in your life.
Right? Of like, you did what now?
And
it's hard not to read the Bible through that lens of going, God, you supported this? Like, no, this is what they did, and God had to clean up their mess.
But
So
he uses
much.
broken people.
Yes. And the entirety of this story, like, none of it would have happened historically the way that it did if they didn't mess up so bad. And so if they were perfect beings, no historical lineup worked with that. It just didn't work. And so I was 18 years old, sitting at a Starbucks, reading the story of David and realizing that no, he absolutely committed that sin with Bathsheba. Crap.
There's a family trail there to prove that one.
The genealogies, there's a reason why those are in there. The genealogies are a direct refute of Islam.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. For that reason.
Interesting.
Because David sinned with Bathsheba, and that was where the line of Jesus came from. So Jesus wouldn't have been born if that didn't happen. So I cried my eyes out that day, realizing that I was never going to have that in common with my family. That I probably was never really going to even be able to talk to them about it or dissect it with them. And most importantly, my father. I'm a total daddy's girl, super close to my dad, and feeling like we were never going to share this. It was seeming like just a huge wall that was going to go up between us at that time. That was what I was projecting forward. And I knew it was going to hurt him. Like, this was going to be a very painful thing for him, and it was like the one thing that I had to be okay with. This is God. God is the one thing that I'm willing to lose my family over. Nothing else. Absolutely nothing else. And then that ended up being the thing that came up. I'm like, shoot. Okay, so after that, it was all Christianity from there. It was just me studying and trying to understand Christianity. The big thing that I was struggling with was coming from an Islamic perspective. They believe that Christians believe in 3 gods. That's what I've always heard.
Interesting.
Studying the Trinity, I was so confused.
That's fair.
I genuinely didn't get it.
What do you mean?
Well, then you talk to Christians and they're like, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Like, can you just...
You can't just say that so casually.
My son is 5, and he's been asking about the Trinity, and that has made me realize how difficult of a concept it is to explain, because I'm trying to explain it to him. But it's not just like most Christians, like, Trinity, just take that as what it is. Okay, so you're studying that.
Yes. So, again, just kind of became this moment of, okay, God, I don't get this. Trinity, explain it to me. Next day, I talked to somebody who's like, oh, there's this book called Experiencing the Trinity that you should read. I was like, okay. He's like, it's this big. It was super small. I read it in a couple of hours. Absolutely answered the question.
It's called Experiencing the Trinity. I'm going to read it.
If you're struggling with how to articulate who God is in terms of the Trinity, that book answered it for me.
Experiencing the Trinity. Okay.
I didn't believe it yet, but it opened my mind to, but it's possible. There is an explanation here. Because again, coming from Islam, it's ridiculous. It's silly. They believe in 3 gods. Why not 10? Why not 20? Like, this is how they talk about it. I get it. Like on the surface, that's kind of how it looks, right? But after reading that book, I was like, no, there is sense here. Do I believe it or not? I don't know. But there's sense to be made here. So that was like a prayer answered immediately that led me down that path. And it was one after another, guys. So the big one for me ended up being, why? Why though? why did this need to happen? I was finding all kinds of support that Jesus did die on the cross, that he did claim to be God. The historical record is powerful from non-Christians as well, from people who didn't believe in it at the time, like happening several years after Jesus had risen from the dead and was witnessed by the 500. Like the one thing that historically nobody was refuting was that he actually was there, that people saw him, that he claimed to be God. Like this was not the argument people were bringing up at that time.
Yeah.
Which was a very strong argument for that's what happened then, because nobody was arguing what happened.
Can I stop you really quick?
Yeah.
Oh, I
know.
Okay, I have. Oh man, I have something. A call I have to jump on. Like, and there's no way around it. But I am so enjoying listening to you.
Good.
I can't even tell you. I'm gonna let you guys continue to talk.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say thank you. I can't wait to listen to the end of this and for future conversations.
Yes.
This is such a beautiful example when Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, of loving God with all of your mind as a God-given tool that we waste so much of it and take for granted. And you using this tool God has given you to pursue truth at all costs in such a way that I feel like honors him so much is just beautiful and really, really amazing. So thank you for your story. I'm so sorry that I have to leave and jump on this, but I'm going to let you guys.
You guys keep going.
We will.
There's a fair chance that I'll be able to get back.
Tap back in.
Yeah, to tap back in. Thank you for
I'm
this.
excited.
This is
All right,
so good.
Yasmeen, thank you.
Keep going.
Looking forward to more conversations.
Okay, well, we're continuing this conversation with Yasmeen. Doug and Ryan both. This was my fault. They had to step out because they had something that I fit this into our schedule today because I so badly wanted to get you on here as quickly as we could. And maybe they just felt a little bit like you're too smart. So maybe that's why they left. It made them feel like, but they mean well. They're good guys. All right, let's continue. So you were talking about Jesus and his resurrection and that there were witnesses of this. And nobody's really refuting that. And you're getting to the point where you're realizing this event is what everything hinges on here. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so between the historical record of everyone at that time who was writing about those events that was not a Christian, not a declared Christian, their attempt was rhetoric. They were trying to refute this. And it was what they didn't say that I found more compelling than what they were saying. They were not refuting that Jesus rose from the dead or that anybody saw him. They were not refuting that he claimed to be God. They were not refuting that he existed. So even people who might claim that Jesus wasn't actually a historical figure, that was just one piece of the puzzle that the people of that day were writing about.
Yeah.
And then fast forward that to last 100 years, last 50 years, last 20 years, recently. It was like every argument that I was reading against it has been rehashed so many times and has been dead and buried so many times that's all it is now. It's like we're just trying it from another angle, but it still doesn't hold water. So the arguments of Jesus not having claimed to be God, I found no support, no support for it whatsoever. The validity of the Gospels, I want to spend some time on that because that has very heavily refuted in many different viewpoints, but Islam specifically as well. It is a common accepted, I would say, scholarly view, if I can put it that way, from Christians and non-Christians alike, that the time frame of when the Gospels were written was extremely close to when Jesus lived, died, and was resurrected. So its proximity to the actual event, exactly what was said in these books. I was definitely eating up a lot of like Lee Strobel's perspective. If you've read any of his works, I found his arguments very compelling. J. Warner Wallace was another one that I learned a lot from. Dallas Willard as well. Just some resources for people who want to dig into this on their side. These people all brought a different angle to their argument in favor of Christianity that was bringing up that no matter which direction you look at it, the Gospels are eyewitness accounts. And there's 4 of them.
Yeah.
That is the most historical support you're ever going to get for any event that ever happened in history. Why don't we grill whether all these other events happened where we have way, way less support for it?
Yeah.
So the Bible being so well supported, these events being so well supported, it really made me just realize that the Bible is not a religious text. in terms of there was this spiritual leader that it was revealed to, which is not unique to Islam. There's a lot of different ones that kind of claim that.
Totally.
This being a collection of books by so many different authors over the course of thousands of years was a very compelling argument to me because of the cohesion.
Yeah.
It's incredibly cohesive from start to finish.
There's a graphic, we could put it up, of the hyperlinks of the Bible, and it's 63,779 or something hyperlinks, where the Bible calls to itself, but it's different time periods, different countries, continents, like
different
authors,
people,
types of people, like so wild, the cohesion, the unity of Scripture. That's always been very compelling to me as well.
Yeah, and coming from not being Christian and looking at that, it's like, okay, I'm getting to the point here where I can't refute this. All of my logical arguments that may have said this is not what it is are dead. Like they're dead and buried. They're just gone. So I realized that Christianity was true 2 years prior to me actually choosing it for myself.
Wow.
Those were also two separate decisions.
Wow.
So the realization that it was true was, okay, I've hit this from every angle that I can in my limited knowledge and capacity, and it's pretty overwhelming just how many pieces of evidence are in full-blown, irrefutable support of Christianity in the way that we believe it today, which is an important point. Not just ancient days of the belief, but nowadays as well, and specifically this more, to use the modern vernacular, the non-denomination version of it, like that we are just the church in the world, kind of concept. So because I also did a denominational study as well. That one was interesting.
Lots of interesting stuff.
Definitely encourage that one too. So upon making that decision, I would say it was more of a realization that this is true. I could not honestly figure out what was holding me back. I had long since dealt with my reservations, my apprehension, and downright fear of potentially losing my father over this, potentially dividing my family in half. I didn't know what it was going to do to my parents' relationship. I didn't know what it was going to do to my father's relationship with his extended family, or what the extended family was going to think. And Middle Eastern culture, we really don't differentiate. Like, it's all family. We do care about what our cousins and our aunts and uncles and our grandparents think. Like, it's not just parents or siblings. So I had to grapple with that because that was the obvious thing all through the 12 years that I was doing this research in the first place. So when I realized that's not it, I made my peace with that. I could not for the life of me figure out what was holding me back. I do not know what was special about the day that I actually did become Christian. All I can say is that prior to that, I read this book called The Cross of Christ by John Stott. And that was kind of the last straw for me, because it answered the why question of why did all of this have to go down the way that it did? Why couldn't it happen any other way? Why is multiple religions not a thing? Like, all religions are right. This book was thorough in the way that it explored the why, from the very beginning of the Bible story all the way to the death and resurrection of Christ, and what the death and resurrection significance was in the entire scheme of the story from the very beginning. And that was a crucial through line piece for me.
Interesting.
That I didn't, like, I was asking the question, but I had no idea how to approach it. 2 days later, here's this book.
There's another book.
Yep. And it answered it beautifully. It was a hard book to get through. Like, it took me time because it's very, like I said, thorough and very scholarly. So I had to do a lot of, like, dictionary right next to me kind of thing to try to get through it. But I knew that was there. Like, the answer was there. So reading that one of the points that Stott addressed was pride, and the way that pride disconnects us from God. It is the reason why it is not possible for you to just be a good person. Like, what that whole argument of why can't we just be good people and call it a day? I struggled with that one. I was like, they're right. Why not? Why isn't that an option?
Doesn't sound like a terrible idea.
Until I read this piece about pride, and it's something that we do not understand. We have no concept of just how detrimental it is to us. And it comes in so many different forms that we don't know what it means. So I did a definitional study of pride, so that I'm not looking at it as what's the American 21st century definition. I want to know, what does it actually mean? And what does it mean biblically as well? What was the proper translation? And all that. It was an interesting study that I also encourage everybody to do on their own. But that was what got me the realization of, oh my goodness, I have not wanted to deal with this. I have not wanted to recognize that. I know you guys keep joking about, me being smart and all that, but the irony, I didn't think I needed a savior. I've got this. I've got this figured out. You see how I figured all this out all on my own, quote unquote. I was very much, I was very happy with my reputation as being the person that was studying both sides, and therefore everybody was cool with me. I was very happy with my reputation as being very intelligent. If I become Christian, I'm no longer considered intelligent. By Muslim standards, by atheist standards, you are now in the idiot category because that's what they think of Christians. I knew that. I didn't want to lose the reputation I already had. So I was putting a lot of stock in the persona that I had built for myself of how I wanted other people to view me. Becoming Christian was going to completely unravel that. Wow. Was I ready to make that decision, to give that up, what I thought was important? So that's where the actual humility is. You brought that up early on. I was kind of sitting here smirking. I was like, I wish I approached it with humility, but I really didn't. That was something God had to work through with me to kick that out of me so that I could see him. Yeah. Because intellectually, again, I came to the conclusion it was true. Yeah. But I wasn't ready to surrender to God. I was still very much living this life of, I've got this. Like I was successful at the time. I was, composer at that time, writing books. Like I'd written 4 books by the time I was 18. Wow. Like I was just, from my perspective, crushing life. You can't touch me. I got this figured out.
Same story. I think I wrote 5 books by the time I was 18 and composed a few soundtracks. But
how big were they? Like how big were they?
I'm kidding.
But yeah, so God definitely had to break through my barriers of what I thought was important in life, what I thought was giving meaning and purpose and value, what I thought was my strength and my confidence. Yeah. It wasn't. It was a facade. And it was a very good one. Yeah. I was very good at putting together the facade that everybody else wanted me to have. From my perspective, like maybe they didn't, but that was how I viewed it. Yeah. So that was what God had to break down in order for me to see him, not intellectually, but spiritually, emotionally, in every way other than the mind. That was my weakness. I could do this intellectually. I didn't know how to do this by heart and by soul. And that also led me to, how does one become Christian? Like, where do you sign up? Is there you just go online, submit an application? How does this work? So this was 2 years after I had decided that it was true, but hadn't chosen it for myself. This was 2 years of God breaking down my facade and my pride.
Intellectually, historically, okay, I agree with this, but personally, I don't know what to do with this for 2 years.
And what does it mean? What does it mean to me? Yeah. Again, I thought I didn't need a savior. I didn't understand. Like, that's the thing everybody else needs. In fact, my prayers were often like that. God, I'm fine. Go help them. And I look back on that now, and like, it amuses me that like, you're just totally missing the point to pray that kind of prayer. Sure. But at the time, I thought that was the right thing to do. So by the time I was ready, it was not all right, God, cracking my knuckles, throw me in, like, put me in, coach, I got this. I don't know what. Like, there was nothing special about this day. It was November 2016. I realized I had never been to church.
Wow.
And was like, I should go. I've been to the mosque. I should experience this. Let me just go and see what it's about. Don't know why. So I just woke up one Sunday. I was already living in Austin at the time, and I reached out to a friend of mine who was worship leader at a church here in Austin. And I was like, yeah, what church do you go to? I'm just going to come check it out. And she's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll come sit with you after worship service. So I'm a composer, okay? So I did not like the music. I was not a good person sitting there going, like, what is this?
This is not for me.
Not for me, not at all.
That's funny.
So it wasn't the worship. It wasn't how good the musicians were, or how great the singers were, or how moving the service was. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like the music. It's not my cup of tea. They had a guest speaker that day. And having done a lot of this research on my own, I was disagreeing with a lot of his points. Wow. And not necessarily in a like, oh, he's totally wrong. It was just I don't know that I would have approached it that way. Like, my critical brain is on. Point being, so it wasn't the worship service. It wasn't the pastor. Yeah. And it was a guest pastor as well, so you can't even can't even go back and ask, the actual pastor of the church. My point is, there was nothing special about anything that happened on that day, about anything that I heard. Nothing was new. my heart I didn't feel different or like I was in any different place. And then the pastor ended the sermon with, if you would like to accept Jesus into your heart today, repeat after me. I can't even say it was a deliberate decision. I just kind of did.
Wow.
I just found myself repeating the words after him. I got maybe a sentence and a half in, and I just started bawling my eyes out. Like I couldn't even get the rest of it out. And I look back on that experience, and it was not an emotion. It wasn't something I was feeling. So I didn't know what to do with it. It was like my body's doing something, something's happening in me, and the only response that I had was to cry because my body didn't know what else to do.
Wow.
But I still, to this day, I'm like, well, I'm not confident that I know what happened that day, but my best guess is that was soul moving, and that was something that had never happened to me before. And that was my first and most prominent like encounter, if you will, with the Holy Spirit. So I ran out of the sermon and went to the bathroom and was just like in the stall crying, going, "What's wrong with me?
What's happening to me?"
And I don't cry. I am intellectual. I read, right?
Yeah.
So my pride was not having it either. I'm like, no, nobody see this. Nobody see me cry. And so I finally got out of there, and I'm texting my friend, like, I need you to come here. Like, something's wrong. And so she's just holding me as I'm bawling my eyes out. And the interesting thing about how this went down is that this particular friend has been, like, I've known her all my life. We grew up in California together. My father is very beloved to her family. Like, they know him, they respect him, they love him. He was kind of a second father to her, like a father figure to her and her family.
Yeah.
This was the person that happened to be there when I made this decision, and she knew the consequences.
Wow.
So that didn't go past my notice either.
Yeah.
Of like the one person who understood why this was such a big deal for me. And I wish I could say that, like, I hear so many stories of Christians sharing their stories of, you know, they felt an overwhelming sense of peace and like euphoria and all that. And honestly, that was not my experience. If I could put an emotion on it, it was resolve. It was like, I just knew this is step one of a very long road ahead of me.
Yeah.
And I did not think I was ready for that long road. My brain is going to, how am I going to tell my dad?
Yeah.
How am I going to tell the family? What's going to happen? You know, and at that time, again, always been very close with my father. I really wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of the friction of the relationship. Like, I wanted us to stay close. And I didn't know if he could. I wanted to respect his position. I wanted to respect what he believes. And I knew this was going to hurt him, to tell him that what decision I had made. And to just know that your decision is a betrayal. It's going to be viewed as a betrayal to somebody that you love dearly. I've heard other stories of Muslims who became Christian that, like, their families disowned them, that they didn't have a good relationship with their families anyway, so it was like they just cut ties and they were fine. That was not my story.
Yeah.
I was determined to keep everybody together. Mine was nothing but a loving family, and there was nothing but love all the way through my family. And so that was like my first test of trusting God, of, okay, I'm willing to let this go, and let this go whatever direction it's going to.
Wow.
But I'm really, really hoping it won't.
Yeah.
And so I'm just eternally grateful that I did tell my father about a year after I became Christian. And he took it very well. And I didn't lose him. In fact, I would argue we're probably closer now than we ever have been. And I'm just so grateful that God preserved my family.
That's awesome.
But the piece that I wasn't ready for, I kept thinking about my father. I hadn't considered my brothers. And because my brothers are not, they don't profess any religious viewpoint. I think they've kind of just been content to we'll just steer clear of that one altogether.
Yeah,
It's kind of the way they handled it, but I'm also very close with my brothers.
Yeah.
So it didn't occur to me that my choosing Christianity might put some friction between my sibling, my relationship with my siblings, until they kind of just approached me about it. Like my conversation with them, they knew. I called them and I told them, after I told my dad, like once I told him, floodgates were open. It's like everybody else can know about it now. And then they didn't really react, except then a few years later where I found out just how apprehensive they were about me becoming Christian. They thought, oh, we're about to lose our sister. Wow. She's going to go, join the churches and be playing keys on stage, and she's just going to want us to come to church all the time with her, and not realizing that that's not what happened. I continued to meet them in the places that were our favorite places.
Yeah.
All three of us are gamers, so we would do like gaming tournaments together and stuff. I'm like, I can do that as a Christian. Why not? So when they realized they weren't going to lose me, and in fact, we got even closer.
That's cool.
And I think that's the part that really changed in me, was not realizing how much more I could love my family, how much deeper my relationships got now that it's driven by Christ and not just by what my perception of a relationship is or ought to be.
Wow, that's incredible. What about your mom? What was that conversation like?
My mom guessed. It just kills me. I learned a lot from my mom. I mentioned earlier that she was the best example of a Christian that I think I possibly could have had in my family, because she loved my father, my brothers, because she didn't just keep pushing her faith or trying to proclaim the gospel every chance that she got. She just lived it. She lived her faith.
Wow.
I didn't know what I was looking at the time. Now I know I was looking at Jesus. But at the time I was just like, my cousin put it best. He said, there's patience and then there's whatever the hell your mom has.
That's
like
amazing.
She just embodies that spiritual gift. It's ridiculous.
Wow.
So she's the peacekeeper. She's the one nobody has a problem with. She's the one that everybody shares all of their deepest, darkest secrets with.
Interesting.
And myself included. She was a little more involved in my journey because I would run ideas by her.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm struggling with this. Like, help me figure it out. She never once told me the answer.
Yeah.
She asked me questions. She gave me resources. She helped me to direct my own thought process, whatever direction it was going to go. And I greatly appreciated that. So she was the one who kind of called towards the end of my intellectual journey that, like, okay, I'm pretty sure she's in. Right? Like, she's talking like a Christian now. And then during those 2 years that I was struggling, it was kind of the same thing. And then before I had told my father, because I was really trying to figure out, like, how do I get this out? I want to tell my father first. I don't want to put my mom in a weird position of having to, like, keep this massive secret from my dad. I just didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
Well, she ended up just kind of approaching me of like, so are you Christian? Yeah. Like, it was just this like super tentative question. I sat there going, how did you know? And she's like, I honestly could see it. Like, something was just different. Something was different with you. So yeah, that's how amazing my mom is.
Wow.
She called it.
So
I didn't actually have to tell her. Yeah, she was just like, yeah, I could see it.
Wow. Well, I have to imagine for your dad, he respected that you went and sought for yourself. It wasn't because you had made a friend and you just decided you're going to believe whatever they say, or you didn't pick a side in your family. You weren't the rebel child who's just going to go against whatever you say, but you just went on a journey to really discover truth. Did that open up for you conversations with him, or did you guys kind of leave it as like, okay, I respect your belief, and we'll just leave it there?
Yeah, so initially, what he respected and appreciated was that I chose God. He was glad I chose God. And he told me that he had my back, regardless of what happened. And yeah, assured me like I'm still father. I ain't going nowhere.
Yeah.
And then kind of came the aftermath of it, where it's hitting him now.
Yeah.
And I expected it. How could he not? You know,
Sure.
he's a father. This is what he believes, and I knew this was going to be difficult, and that he was going to be going a lot of different directions, trying to figure out what does this actually mean? What are the implications here?
Yeah.
So we only really had one, maybe two conversations in the immediate aftermath. That was more him sharing with me his perspective, and it was rough. It was rough to sit through because he very much felt betrayed. He very much felt disrespected. He didn't like that I didn't bring him into the conversations. He thought that might have changed some of my perspectives, and I did my best. Like, from my perspective, like I tried. I did my best to kind of have these conversations and let him know where I was at any given time. But it had to be my choice. I couldn't bring him into the actual decision. So after those first couple of conversations, I really didn't get to share with him why I chose Christ, but he shared with me a lot of how he was feeling. And so that there was a little bit of I don't want to say a rift in the relationship. It was more of just this, like, this sucks. You know, like we felt it. This sucks, and we're going to be fine. but there's a lot of emotions to work through. So we haven't talked about it since. Like ever since then, we've both just been content to kind of let it lie.
Yeah.
I think until the right time. I do hope that there will be a right time, and I think he does as well. But we're now we talk about literally everything else, and we dissect concepts and topics together all the time. We'll talk for hours just dissecting topics, but we both just kind of respectfully leave this one off the table for now.
Yeah. When it comes to baptism, public declaration of the faith you put in Jesus, anyone who gets baptized, it's a step of boldness and faith. But what can be lost on us in a quote unquote Christian culture, I guess we're post-Christian culture now, we're called that, but a culture where Christianity isn't like persecuted, so to speak, you can get baptized and there's not going to be repercussions for that from a government. That decision can be lost on us a little bit, of the boldness of what it meant in the early church and what that means in other parts of the world. I've been at baptism services in other countries where I know those people getting baptized, they're forfeiting family rights, citizenship, like all kinds of things in the places that they live. I think you have a closer pulse on that because you publicly proclaiming your faith bears implications culturally within family and different beliefs. What was that process like for you to decide to get baptized and to share your story up on a screen to the world? To be on a podcast, to publicly talk about Jesus comes at a cost for you. It's not just easy and this is my faith, and maybe like it is for some of us in a different way. Talk about that boldness that rose up in you and how you decided to get baptized and tell your story.
Yeah, I would say that no boldness on my part. This was me just like, okay, God, are we doing this now? I don't know if I'm ready. So when I first became Christian, a lot of the Christian, I say rituals, that doesn't do it justice, but things like baptism and communion, like these things that we are called to do, were super weird to me.
Sure.
I had no idea what to make of them. So they meant nothing to me. I was just confused.
Yeah.
So I felt no pressure or no inclination to get baptized. It was probably a couple years in that I even found out it was a commandment.
It's funny. It is funny thinking about someone that didn't grow up with a Christian background, just being like, oh, you believe in Jesus now. Okay, you need to go get in that water and go under and come back up. Like, what? Why would I do that?
Why?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, so for me, that was absolutely the question of like, this is weird. And I'm not going to lie, it felt a little culty.
Sure.
Like, why are we doing this? Okay. But yeah, the more that biblically, because again, first thing I did then was, let's go find out what the Bible says about it and let's do some research. And so I understood it, but what I understood was baptism is a public declaration of faith.
Yeah.
So I reined it in. Like my immediate guard went up of, it's not time. There are still too many people in my family that don't know. And this is not how I want them to find out. So not just baptism itself, but just generally speaking, sharing my faith or mentioning to anybody that I was Christian, whether they were part of my family or somebody I just met, I was very reserved about talking about my faith. If I was asked outright, I would say. But I was very much a closet Christian for the first few years, just trying to figure this out. And also giving God the chance to actually work in me, because again, it was largely intellectual up to this point.
Sure.
So this was now my chance to actually have a relationship with God, which was one of the things that drew me to Christianity. That just, it wasn't just beautiful or something that I wanted. It was like, no, that checks out. That checks out, that's the way that this was supposed to be, and we're pulling away from it. So I wanted that repair, of like, okay, now let's explore what the relationship with God, my relationship with God looks like. And I think I needed that time without anybody else's opinions coming in. So I needed that time to find it, and I needed that time after the fact. So baptism to me was just in that category of it's a public declaration of faith. I'm not ready. And so as the years went by and I started to get used to it, like where it's a thing, okay, it's a concept. It still just became this, no. Like I would come up with any reason not to do it. Don't know why. Really genuinely do not know why I was so reluctant for so long. And it's once again one of those things I can't tell you what was different about right now. Or what made me choose this. All I can say is that the very first sermon that I went to at Red Rocks was a baptism service. And I was so moved by everybody's stories. And I'm not going to lie, I've been frustrated with some of these surface level sermons that I've heard from any of the churches that I've gone to of like, we've covered this a million times over. Can we talk about something else now? So coming into a church where it's not a sermon, I'm just listening to real people's stories of redemption. and finding Christ was just so much more moving to me, and something just kind of clicked. Like, if I get baptized, I think it's going to be here, because again, to me, it's a big deal. This is it's a bigger deal for me to publicly declare my faith, because I don't know who's going to see this. And at this point, most of my relatives are now aware. My priority was my father.
Yeah.
And he's been aware.
Yeah.
And I am growing more and more confident and comfortable in my faith and feeling closer and closer to God, that I thought, okay, is it time now? Is it time for this to be a more public thing for me? And so then this year, I published a book. This year, God dealt with me on a few more things that were, pride and self-righteousness related, that needed to be handled before me sharing my story would turn into his glory and not me just spouting off all the cool stuff I've learned,
Yeah.
which I didn't want it to be. And I knew that
Right.
if I'm going to share this story, it needs to be with God's purpose in mind, with God's purpose being the only thing that comes out of this, and not me or whatever I might get out of it. That all happened this year, like God just preparing my heart.
Yeah.
So that just meant that, okay, I am now open to it. So here we go. And then it just happened that there was openings for the baptism here, that there was openings for the video testimonial, that I grabbed the opportunity, even if it didn't get shown, at the very least, so that I can hear, how am I sharing my story and how does it come out? And what's interesting is I had rehearsed how I was going to share this. I broke it down into 4 minutes. It's like condensed it into 4 minutes. And the whole time I'm praying of like, okay, God, how do you, like, this is how I'm preparing it, but whoever needs to hear this and however they need to hear it, please let that be what I actually say. And so rehearse, pray, both back and forth. And then I finally get there. And then these guys are like, oh, did you read the questions? No, there were questions. And I do my homework. I would have known about that. How the heck did I not know there were questions? So I was like, okay, here's God derailing me. Sounds good. Let's roll with it. And I had no idea what I said in the video. No idea what came out. And then when I finally watched it and saw how it came out, I was like, that went a whole lot better than I thought it did. But
Good job, Jacob.
Yes. Once again, to God's glory then.
Yeah.
Because that's not
Not
what
your
I even
script.
meant to say. Yeah. And just being open to that and finally seeing that now I have that better balance of, okay, I'm going to prepare and I'm going to use the gifts that God has given me, but I'm also going to pray that, hey, derail me at any moment.
Yeah.
Is this where you want me to go? And if
Yeah.
I don't hear anything, if nothing changes, okay, great, I'm prepared, and this is where we're going. And kind of just learning that balance of the faith and the decision making that we have.
Yeah. It's thinking back to when you first went into a church, crying in the bathroom, kind of the moment when your head and your heart were starting to connect, it sounds
Yeah.
like. Over the years, as you've built a relationship with Jesus, who is he to you now? Which is such a loaded question in so many cool ways, because he was a confusing historical figure. He was this guy that you realized everything hinged on, this guy you went to research, and all of a sudden you're crying in a bathroom, and years later you're telling the world about your faith in him. Describe your relationship with Jesus.
I often wonder, looking back, because again, I did have like hindsight of seeing the ways that God was moving in my life that I wasn't aware of at the time. And so for me, it was never really a question of, is God real? Although I did do that research, it was which God, right? And one of the primary differences, if not, in my opinion, the biggest problematic difference between Islam and Christianity is who is God. There's a whole lot of what in Islam. It's not a whole lot of who. This is not a personal God. So the more that I delved into that intellectually of who God is according to Christianity, that got me more to this concept of he is a relational being. He is personable. He created us in his image. What does that mean? To have relationship.
Yeah.
Like, we are hardwired for relationships. If I have relationships with everybody that I know, why should I not have a relationship with my own God? And what does that look like? And God cannot love you without there being a relationship there, right? Like, the Bible focuses a lot on how he knows you.
Yeah.
He knows you better than your own mother, better
Yeah.
than you know yourself. You don't know somebody that deep and still love them, you know? If people knew the stuff that we all thought, you know?
Yes.
So that realization of what is true unconditional love was intellectual before. Attaching it to Jesus, to somebody who showed up who actually came down and spent time with us and all of our muck and our mess and loved us anyway, was just such a powerful story to me that for all everybody else keeps trying to push it away or swear like, well, he's God, why would he do that? Why would he come down? You know, I'm like, yeah, he's God. Why would he do that unless he loves us? And love is the most important thing to us. It's the one thing you hear people spout left and right, no matter what culture they're from. It's all relationships. It's all love. It's reality. And the more that you accept that as reality and explore it as reality, it checks out that our God is love. So coming from that as a realization and then coming to that as, okay, I want it to be true for me now. Like, how do I understand that from my perspective? Has very much been a journey of God slowly revealing himself to me. And still, the irony, he still does it intellectually for the most part, because that's what I do, right?
So he speaks your language.
He speaks my language.
Yeah.
I ask for it, I pray for it, and then there's a book. And that has not changed.
Yeah.
That has not changed even after becoming Christian.
Wow.
Of course, now it's like YouTube videos and books and blog articles and news articles. Yeah, it comes in many different forms, but God's always had my back on that. And so that is very much how I've started to kind of define my relationship with God. It's very conversational.
That's great.
Like, we talk things through, you know.
Wow.
I'm not always aware of it being from God. You know, there's a whole lot of just me yapping out my thoughts and then, okay, so what do you think, God? Okay, anyway, good night. And then the next day, here's
the book.
Yeah, here's the book. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks, God, you know. So it's very much just turned into the realization that my relationship with God is not going to look the same way that it does for everybody. In the same way, my relationship with my mom doesn't look the same as my brother's relationship with him or my dad's relationship with her. Sorry. And that difference makes it that much more personal.
Yeah.
And that's not something that, yes, you can read the Bible over and over and over, and it says that, and it's compelling and it's powerful. But the actual decision to pursue God is where the relationship actually happened. And God honors that when it is genuine, because we're going to pursue him however we know how.
Yeah.
And for me, that was intellectual.
Yeah.
And that pursuit, I've only ever felt like God honored that pursuit to draw me closer to him.
Wow.
Through the way that he knows that I can hear him.
I loved so much in your story, when in the condensed version, at one point you said, you know, how I used to know him was this distant God, was this, you know, figure historically, whatever. But I know him now. He's my friend. He's my savior. He's my king. That you found him in all of the beautiful facets of who he is. That it's like all the intellect and facts and knowledge in the world, and he'll give you all that stuff ultimately because he just wanted to be close to you and for you to know him and that love he has for you. And you can go talk to all kinds of people now with great perspectives and answer questions and have, you know, healthy conversation and stuff. But ultimately what burns in your heart is that loving relationship with him, which is what I think in all of my studying of faiths and stuff is the most compelling, beautiful part of it, is that father who wants his children close to him and loves them so deeply. And I'm so thankful that you found that. I want to ask you this, because I think often Christians either are perceived this way or can be this way, as very us against them, us against the world, us against people of other faiths. And the reality of what Jesus called was is us for them to go love them and show them who he is. What do Christian people need to know about Muslim people? What do we need to know, not based off our perception, but in reality of, I'm so passionate about the church needing to be bridge builders. And while maybe the overlap sometimes in doctrine is slight, the overlap in being humans is full. And what are some ways I think we as Christians can love people of Muslim, you know, of Islamic faith and other faiths as well, but we'll use Islam as the example because that's what your background was, those two things.
Yeah, and I love that you said that about building bridges, because that is something that has been super frustrating to me in my experience with Christians before and after I became Christian. And in everybody's defense, they don't know how. We as Americans specifically are isolated. You can drive 10 hours in another direction and you're still in Texas. Like there is no difference. It
just keeps going, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Then fly 6 hours. You might make it to New York.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You go to other places of the world and countries are very close together. Different languages are very close together. So they're a lot more aware and comfortable in other countries with people who are from other places, because it's just normal to them.
Right.
So this is very much like to American Christians.
Yeah.
It's the go out of your comfort zone,
Right.
go meet people. And one of the things that I feel is is sorely lacking is perspective. Too many Christians, and I wonder how much of this is like church rhetoric, is go preach the gospel to the world. From my perspective, they've heard the gospel. That's not the problem. You're going and, like, let's say I just met you. I don't even know your name yet. Okay, so let me tell you about Jesus. Like, I don't know. Get to know them first. Make this a genuine relationship. Build the bridge, exactly. If you can look at it as we're all diplomats. We're all ambassadors for Christ now. Whether it's to your next door neighbor who does speak the same language, or you're in another country meeting people who have a completely different viewpoint. Muslims are no different. They're some of the best and sweetest people I've ever met. It's actually kind of upsetting to me sometimes to see that like they're better people than some of the Christians I've known. So in any walk of life that you go to, you're going to have people on all sides of the spectrum. You're people that you can't stand. You're people that are like super sweet and kind. Truth is independent of all of that, right? So you know as a Christian that you have the truth. Don't be threatened. Why are you threatened? Why would you feel the need to go and immediately just start defending your faith or like carrying a torch for it? What I have seen most effective is living your faith. Being loving. Just that by itself, just being a loving person. And then building that relationship first. Get to know them and where they're at and understand their faith. They will reciprocate it back if you're just asking honest questions about what they think and what they believe. There is no, like, take the fight out of it. Take the us against them mentality out of it, because it's not like that at all. And they know as well that they're coming into this apprehensive, like knowing that you have a different belief too. They're not necessarily trying to hurt you or offend you or anything. They're like, okay, how do I navigate these waters? So if you can be that person that makes it a safe place for us to just have an open dialogue about these topics, that to me has been I hesitate to say effective because it's independent of whether or not it's effective. It's the godly way. It's building those bridges. It's building those relationships. It's living out your faith. It's the verse that says they will know us by our love. You know, just take a hold of what that means for a second. You know.
I think that even sometimes for some Christians it may be insecurity that keeps us from sharing our faith because we know, I don't know the answers to all these questions. And obviously you have a lot of confidence in your faith because you've done the work. And it's not that every Christian has to become an intellectual that understands, you know, that level of every question, manuscripts, New Testament, all that kind of stuff. But I do think what's so admirable about your story is that you went and sought it out and like, I'm going to be confident in what I find to be the truth. Versus a lot of people who kind of like, oh, I've just chosen to believe this, but never really go and do the work to actually see. And I think that's a beautiful part of our faith, that there is so much evidence. There is so much to understand and know and stand on, not so you can go win a debate, but so you can have confidence to share your faith, that you don't believe in some pipe dream fairy tale with blind faith that I think a lot of the rest of the world looks at Christians and kind of labels us as idiots because it's like, you have this blind faith in this guy who rose, But a lot of times it's because we have no real answer or understanding other than I just kind of listen to somebody else. And I think that's really inspiring from your story and should be to a lot of people that are part of our church. Listen to this podcast is, hey, go do some homework and actually learn more about the truth that you believe in. And you're only going to find more beauty in how God interwove this story and how he's left all these beautiful Easter eggs and things for us to find. And he will speak your language and reach you more and more. The more deeply you seek him, the more he'll speak to you, just like he did through your journey of intellect and wanting to know the truth. It could be totally different for somebody else, but we often, I think, just stop when it's like, okay, I've made this decision to believe this, and don't continue to pursue the depth of who God is and all the things he could reveal to us that eventually could lead us to build bridges and share our faith with other people.
And there may very well be a fear of what you're going to find for a lot of people, especially those who grew up Christian. Again, I didn't have that experience because coming from two different religions was like, I'm already in a difficult position. But I think when you're facing all that you have to lose, again, when you're facing, okay, this is my identity. My family's Christian. I was raised Christian. I was raised in the church. This is normal and familiar and comfortable. And I think there is a fear that comes along with that of like, what if I do dig into this and find that it's all nonsense? And I've often wondered that for Muslims as well, of like, if you can go in as a Christian knowing that this isn't just the belief system that you then hit them with the truth and, oh, I didn't know that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay, done.
Yeah, no, this is their identity.
Yeah.
This is everything they know. This is their families, their extended families. This is their country. This is their language. Like, it is completely infused into who they are.
Right.
You don't just give that up out of nowhere.
Right.
The mind is not ready to just give that up out of nowhere.
Sure.
Everybody is on a journey.
Yeah.
For every overnight Christian you might think you found is backed up by years of struggling with this.
Yeah.
And so I would also just encourage Christians to be aware of that Muslims have a lot to lose. And it can get bad.
Sure.
It can be dangerous. It can,
Sure.
like, there's, for them personally, like, yes, as Christians, we would argue that they're going to get something so much better. Yes, but
There's also a
that's
reality.
that's
to
like
here
the
and now.
spiritual maturity you get 30 years
Right.
later, not
Right.
in the moment when you're looking at your family going, I don't know how I'm going to tell them.
Yeah.
I don't know how, again, for the people that are concerned for their lives or concerned for their, to be disowned.
Yeah.
There's some really real stakes
Absolutely.
that Muslims have on the table.
Yeah.
Go in being respectful and compassionate about that.
Yeah. Which Jesus did.
Exactly.
Right? Jesus modeled that so beautifully. What about your future? From here, you write books, you write music. Like, what do you see God doing through your life? Obviously, he didn't lead you on that journey just for, okay, I'll hang out for a little bit and figure out this Christianity thing. Like, he's got so much for you to do with all the ways he's gifted you, all that you've discovered the rest of your life. What does that look like for you?
That is a great question. Projecting, if I may. I've often looked at what are all the individual gifts that God has given me, and how am I using those gifts, and what could they potentially be used for in the future. And there's a lot of through lines, like common threads. Everything I do is very public, and I do a lot of public speaking. I'm performing in front of people. Now being an author as well, like, my name is now out there and known. So there's just a lot of pieces of my life and of my skill sets that are very communication heavy.
Yeah.
They're very delivering messages heavy, and very much that bridging gaps. Like, I've always kind of thought of myself as like a natural diplomat. And the ways that I'm out there, the ways that people know me, are bridge building. Music unites everybody. It's beautiful, right? Everybody likes that. And then what I'm playing is instrumental. So you can't even be like offended by the lyrics or anything. So I've found that I've built a lot of relationships with people off the bat of all different walks of life, simply from being in that world of music. Just the other day, I was at a writing conference, met a ton of people, because I'm like one of two extroverts in a room full of introverts, right? So I met everybody, and
Sure.
I got everybody's contact information. Well, I'm the Christian. I'm bringing Jesus with me everywhere I go. So these types of things have historically in my life always been the bridge builders anyway. And I'm just really curious, apprehensive, and we'll see where this goes,
cool.
to see how God will continue to use those things, because that to me is really where most of the way that God has used me has been in that regard.
Yeah.
And I don't see that as changing. I just see it as growing
Yeah.
and blossoming, and finding different ways to reach people through the things that I do that they enjoy, the things that I do that's just asking them questions, getting to know them better, the things that I do on a communication level, on even for my full-time job in marketing. Like, I'm primarily an account manager, so I'm client-facing. I'm the one building all the relationships with people.
Yeah.
And if you haven't noticed, I can talk for days.
I love
So
it.
I just imagine it's going to be in that shared pool of meaning, that dialogue, that God will continue to use me.
Yeah. 2 Corinthians 5 comes to mind, where we're called ambassadors for
Yeah.
Christ, right? That's you. Like, a good ambassador is going on behalf of the one who sent them to relay to somebody what the one who sent them wants them to know. And a good ambassador builds relationships so people will hear them, versus coming in to just stamp their agenda. This is what they said, and whether you got to tell me whether you agree or
You
disagree.
get
right
fired
here,
for
right?
being that
You get
kind
fired.
of an ambassador.
But I think somebody with your intellect and knowledge and how much you've journeyed and learned, it'd be easy to be like, she needs to go debate this person, this person, this person. And you'd probably crush debates. But for me, I'm like, no, what I love about you is you're the person I'd go, you need to go get coffee with her, because she's going to love you, because she comes with a perspective of, I'm not here to win a debate and try to make you look dumb. I'm here to help you see the love that I found in Jesus and care about you as a human being and build a bridge and build a relationship. And that's what we need. Good ambassadors for the kingdom of God. And so thank you for being that for our church, for sharing your story, for coming on the podcast, being bold in your faith in a really loving way. And I can't wait for people to read what you write and hear what you compose, and ultimately your testimony, the power of it. Ryan and I had a funny moment sitting in the inflatable hot tub while Doug was sharing the gospel, the simple gospel, the story of Jesus and what he's done for us. And, 5 services, people are putting their faith in Jesus. People are getting baptized. People are sharing their testimonies. And it was this surreal weekend. So much amazing stuff happening. We looked at each other at one point. We're like, I guess Jesus was right when he said, we overcome by 2 things, the blood of the Lamb and the power of our testimony. It's very simple. It's just how good Jesus is and what he did for us, and us sharing what that has meant to us in our lives. And we got to see that on display. It's happened in your life, and there's going to be a lot of lives that get to experience that through the power of your testimony, rooted in the blood of the Lamb. So look forward to the story to come. Thank you for coming on Afterthoughts, and would tell everybody we'll share links to your books and your music and all that. And,
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And keep up with you, and maybe you can come back on sometime in the future, and we'll have a bunch more questions for you, and maybe these guys will stay the whole time.
Well, now that we know, we'll plan out a couple of hours, right?
I think they were offended that you don't like golf, but we can talk about other stuff. It's totally fine. Yasemin, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
This was
Thank
awesome.
you too.
Yeah, we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good.
All right.